to go?
Yes, we're all set to go.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a meeting of the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And Thomas, if you want to just review the rules of decorum for the meeting.
Sure, yeah. Give me just one moment to get these pulled up. All right, I'm just going to cover some basic rules that cover our public participation at city meetings. First of all, we want you to know that the city has engaged with members of the public to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. And this vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement process, you can visit our website at the link below. And the following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision, which will be upheld during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupt or otherwise impede the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to identify themselves using the name they are commonly known by and must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. When we make it to the public comment opportunity and we call for individuals that would like to speak, you can indicate that you would like to speak by using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen or on your cell phone. And if you happen to be calling into the meeting, you could press *9 to raise your hand. And then if you don't see that raise hand icon, there might be this reactions button here, which you can click and expand, and then you'll see the raise hand button. All right, and that covers our rules of decorum. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Chair.
Okay. So tonight we have two items. For each item, first staff, Robbie will present, and then after that, the applicant will have a chance to present. And then members of the public will be invited to comment, and then the board will take a vote. And each item, an affirmative vote requires 3 or more board members. That will result in passage of the motion. And it can't be approved with fewer than 3 votes. And we have everyone here, so that's 3 is the right number. So I guess we're ready to plunge in. The first item that we have on the agenda is it's BOZ 2026-05. It's 2110 5th Street. So Robbie, do you want to tee it up?
I definitely can. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. So again, this is docket number BOZ 2026-00005. The address is 2910 5th Street. And this is a building coverage variance as part of a proposal to construct a detached accessory building for a new accessory dwelling unit, ADU. The applicant is requesting a variance to the maximum building coverage allowance at 2910 5th Street. This will be a variance for approximately 126 square feet above the maximum allowance of 2,295 square feet for the 6,227 square foot lot. Section of the land use code to be modified, section 9711 Boulder Revised Code 1981. And up on the screen, I have the location of the subject property. It is zoned RL1. And we did receive 2 letters of support or written support prior to tonight's meeting. And each of them was from arguably the most impacted properties to this variance request, which is the property to the north and the property to the south. And a little zoning and history background. Again, it is zoned RL1 and the lot size is 6,227 square feet. The minimum lot size for RL1 is around 7,000 square feet, So that does make this property a substandard sized lot. And some history, the main home was permitted and built circa 1946. And there was a late 90s renovation and addition to the home that did receive a permit that was completed around that time. The specifics of that permit, I unfortunately could not find. Maybe that's something that the applicant would be able to expand upon should the board be interested in those details. And then the subject detached accessory building is in active review under BLD ACC 2026-00004. That's a building permit. And the subject building coverage issue was discovered during the permit review. And that is why the applicant is in front of us this evening. And the existing and proposed floor area is 2,322 and 2,799 square feet. And that does include the subject detached building. And the max allowed for the property, for this property, is 3,345 square feet. So they are still under the maximum allowance for floor area. And then the building coverage, which is what the board is considering this evening, the existing and proposed building coverage is 1,944 square feet, proposed being 2,421 square feet, including the detached building. And the minimum required for the property, or I should say the maximum required for the property, is around 2,295 square feet. So the applicant is requesting about 126 square feet in building coverage over the maximum allowed for this property. And both floor area and building coverage are actively being reviewed and will ultimately be reviewed pending the decision tonight through the active building permit. And then when it comes to solar access and the bulk conditions and height, no issue has been presented at this time, and all of this will also be verified at time of the building permit. And then up on the screen, we have the existing site conditions. We have the survey, which is the upper left image. And then we have the aerial view, which is the lower right image. And then the applicant was kind enough to provide some good and detailed images of not just the front of the house, but especially the backyard where this proposed structure is to be constructed. And I know there was some mention of topographical change and restrictions by the applicant. So this gives the board a good idea of the existing conditions for the backyard where this proposed structure is going to be built. And then, so tonight the board is only considering building coverage variance. All setbacks, the height, everything else is being constructed in conformance with Title IX or the land use code. The only thing the board is considering tonight is a building coverage variance, and that is to the maximum building coverage for this lot. And that's for approximately 126 square feet above the maximum allowance of 2,295 square feet for this property. And we can come back to any of these details should the board want to. I also, just for the sake of conversation, in case the board is interested, I have in the presentation and up on the screen both the definition of building coverage. I'm not going to go through the whole definition right now, but we can come back to it if needed. And then I also have the purpose statement for maximum building coverage. I will read through that because it's somewhat shorter. The purpose statement, and this is taken directly from the land use code, is the purposes of building coverage standards are to establish the maximum percentage of lot surface that may be covered by principal and accessory buildings, to preserve open space on the lot, and to preserve some views and visual access to the sky and enhance privacy for residences that are adjacent to new development. Again, in case the board is interested in the purpose of building coverage and then also the definition, I have this within my presentation, and we can come back to this if needed for further discussion. And then we also have the floor plan, which is the left image. And then we also have two of the elevation drawings for the proposed subject building that is resulting in the building coverage variance request. And then when it comes to the review criteria, staff has already mentioned to the board and has informed the applicant that we do have concerns whether or not this meets all of the applicable variance review criteria. Specifically, and I have highlighted in red where we have concerns, and that it might be worth the board looking closer at and determining, making their ultimate decision. But the first one comes from criterion 1A, both I and II, or both 1 and 2. It was mentioned that it is a somewhat substandard size lot and there is some topographical change. Whether or not staff or the city feels that that is a true hardship is to be determined. We weren't necessarily sold that that was a noticeably restrictive hardship, undue hardship presented onto the application. And then it was also mentioned that the intent is to allow the current homeowners to move into this building at a later time. When it comes to 1A2, we understand the reasoning for this and the need for this. But at the same time, when it comes to 1A2, that there is a physical disability affecting the owners of the property or any member of the family owner who resides on the property, which impairs the ability of the disabled person to utilize or access the property. That is more intended for anticipated and not, it appears that this is a future intent for the homeowners and not something that is impacting them necessarily today. I will let the applicant kind of dive into that deeper and to kind of follow up to that statement, but staff does have concerns whether 1A, both I and II are being met. And then we also skip to 1C because of such physical circumstances or conditions. Their property cannot reasonably be developed in conformity with the provisions of this chapter. We recognize that there is a wish to have an ADU, but staff feels that you could still accomplish reasonable development, meaning the establishment of an ADU through other means without the need of a building coverage variance. They are asking for about 126 square feet over, which is not a big number, but we also feel that there may be other design options for the property in whole to reduce the existing building coverage to make way for this specific building, assuming that the building size cannot be modified or reduced in any way. And then also any unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. Again, staff has a hard time seeing the undue hardship that has been presented in the way that there appears either a smaller ADU or reductions in current building coverage to make way for this specific size ADU is possible. It may not be feasible, and that's something the applicant can definitely touch on and expand on. But we feel there are other options, even if they are not the preferred options. And then lastly would be the minimum variance that would afford relief and would be the least modification of the provisions of this title. That's criterion 5C. Just like with 1C and even 1D, it appears there are design solutions or site changes that could be made to make way for this specific size accessory structure or ADU. So with that, we have concerns whether or not 5C are being met. So with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions and we can revisit any pages if needed. But I do know that we have good representation from the application, the applicant, and representation. So I'm sure they can provide additional information, and I do believe they are wanting to speak to the board as well. So if the board has any questions specific to staff, I'd be more than happy to answer those. And at this time, I will hand it back over to you.
Okay, I know I have at least one question for Robbie, but I'll defer to others. Does anyone else have a question for Robbie?
I have a question about the building coverage calculation. If you go back to that slide where you had like the 7 bullets, I was reading
Yes.
them to confirm. So have they used how much of the extra front porch and rear porch building coverage have they applied?
And is this the screen you were talking about?
That's still loading. Probably the next one. Next one. The one with the porches, the calculation of the building coverage.
Oh, let's see. Just tell me when.
There you go. BR's or the definition slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. So to answer your question, there is a calculation and it all comes down to lot size. and that determines what your ultimate coverage is. And then up on the screen, as I'm sure you're already reading, the definition of building coverage is what is building coverage, but we also have 6 exemptions, as we call them, that do not count. And one of those is a low deck or a porch under 30 inches. And then we also have one for front porches, but that only applies to the main building, not accessory structures or accessory dwelling units.
And then what about number 4?
And 4 is up to 150 square feet of additional porch area not located in the front yard. And the key part to this is for a detached dwelling unit. This would not be a detached dwelling unit. That's for the main home. So accessory buildings and accessory dwelling units within those buildings do not get the 150 square foot exemption.
Right. But I guess it's combined, right? We're talking about combining the building coverage. So I guess that they are linked.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just they don't get to exempt that 100. They don't get to take a piece out of that 150 square feet of additional porch area, but it will still count if it's over 30 inches in height.
Okay. Understood. Right. So it doesn't matter that if their porch area is above 30 inches, it still counts.
Correct.
I was making sure there wasn't like a loophole where if you put a roof over that porch, then it doesn't count.
No, it
or
wouldn't.
the
That's
deck,
only
yeah.
to the main home.
Yep. Understood.
And I'll leave this up in case anybody else has
Continuation on this question. So you had mentioned it applies for the lot size. So is that building coverage calculated based upon the 6,200 square feet of the lot size, or is that based upon the RL1's like 7,000 square feet?
It's based off of the actual lot's size, so the 6,200 give or take. So if this lot was 7,000 square feet, which is typical for RL1, their building coverage allowance would be a little bigger because it's based off of the actual surveyed lot size, not the minimum requirement for a lot size.
And do we know what that number is or no?
I can try to calculate that real quick for you. Are you talking for 7,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it open in front of me.
Oh, if you have it, Drew, go for it.
It's 2450 square feet for 7,000 in RL1.
Thank you, Drew.
There's a little calculator if you Google it.
Yep, that's what I use.
That's right. The 2450 is greater than their request. If they were 7,000 square feet.
Correct. Does that help,
Just
Craig?
can I
That
ask-
answers my question. Thank you.
could you just summarize though what you heard from that, Craig? Because I got a little confused in there with the 2250. That would be based on a 7,000 square foot lot, but this lot is smaller than that. So we can't reference that. Is that what you're saying? You guys are saying?
Correct. Yeah,
Correct.
my question was, since this lot size is smaller than the minimum lot size for an RL1 of the 7,000 square feet, I was curious if it was the minimum lot size, then what would the building coverage be, and would it fall there? That was kind of my question, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I just wanted to clarify. That's what I heard. I'll be on my other computer in a minute. Thank you, guys.
So just to summarize that, if this was a 7,000 square foot lot, which it's not, the allowed building coverage would be 2,450 square feet. They are proposing 2,421. So if this was a 7,000 square foot lot, there would be no need for a variance. But they're at 6,227. So their maximum building coverage per the calculation is 2,295. That's why they need the 126 square foot variance for the building coverage, because they're a substandard size lot.
Does anyone else have any other questions before I launch my question?
I have a quick one. I noticed there's a fairly large back deck on the house. Is that contributing to the current building coverage on the lot?
Yes, it is.
Gotcha. And it was removing or reducing that deck size, one of the recommendations from city staff as far as a modification the applicant can make.
It wasn't necessarily a recommendation, but reducing that deck size would make way for more allowable building coverage.
Got it. And I guess is the total deck size, I assume larger than 126 square feet?
I believe it is around 450 square feet in size, the deck.
Got it. Thank you. That answers my question.
Anyone else?
It looks like Jill is raising her hand. I just got a notification.
Okay. Jill, did you have a different question? She might be in between.
Maybe not.
Yeah, so I'll use this opportunity to just ask my question. Just about the criteria H1I, the first one. About unusual physical circumstances or conditions. I guess it's H1AI. Can you just, the way I read the application, I came away sort of convinced by their explanation of the unusual physical circumstances just because of the grade change between the rear and the front of the house. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about how staff sort of wasn't clear that they met that particular criteria.
Oh, of course. And that really comes down to what is the specific kind of peculiar undue hardship that has been presented specific to limitation or narrowness or a physical condition of the site. We do recognize there is some grade change, but we didn't feel it was necessarily drastic enough to where other options would not be possible. And we also, we don't feel that it's necessarily a narrow lot, but it is substandard in size, but not significant to where something couldn't be developed. So it's not that we don't think there are physical circumstances projecting an undue hardship onto the property. It's just that we weren't sure if they were necessarily warranted to where this specific criterion would be met. So it was more of something that maybe the board can consider further and whether or not the board feels that 1A, but either I or II are being met. So we recognize there are some lot size limitations, but we don't feel it's necessarily an undue hardship that has been presented because they are asking for a building coverage variance, which is catered to a specific lot size. And it's been in this kind of configuration for quite some time. So it's not necessarily a limitation that would catch somebody off guard in any other circumstance. So it's more just we don't know if it meets it, and it's kind of up to the board to decide whether or not it does.
Okay.
Long-winded response.
No, that's helpful. And I mean, this is kind of related, and maybe this is less of a question than just a consideration for the full board, but you kind of indicated in going over H1C that you felt that there might be other options for modification. And can you go into any sort of just like examples of alternative modifications that might be within the criteria?
Of course, and Sean has already brought probably what is one of the more feasible, whether or not it's feasible at the end of the day is to be determined, but possibly reducing existing building coverage to make way for this building. It doesn't appear that a reduction in size, 400, the size of the proposed ADU is not necessarily big, but it's also not the smallest we've seen. So it really comes down to, and this is a question more for the applicant, why can the existing coverage not be reduced anymore? And why could the design of this specific ADU not be reduced in size to at least get closer to the maximum building coverage allowance for this property? And then we also recognize that even though ADUs are very popular, not every property in Boulder is allowed or is can have one. So we recognize that this is more of a, because it's a request for an ADU, they are asking for a building coverage versus maybe a smaller lot with less livable space within an existing home. That seems more understandable in terms of meeting the specific criterion. So again, that's something that the board is going to need to discuss amongst themselves, whether or not asking the applicant to look into or to provide reasoning in terms of why can the existing coverage not be reduced. That's something that the board can possibly ask of the applicant, either at this meeting or at a later meeting. So that's really where we're coming from, is because it is an ask for a proposed building and a proposed building with an ADU. We just feel that there are design solutions that could at least reduce the amount of variance for building coverage.
Okay, thanks.
And Jill's hand's up again.
I'm trying to be polite.
Go for it.
No, I liked your question and I want to tag along on that question because I'm, 462 square feet is not very much square feet to live in. So at the same time, I guess it depends on, like, part of me is like, where does the concept of having an ADU fall in here? I mean, I hear what you're saying, Robbie, and we're not entitled to have an ADU. Not every property can have an ADU. And maybe not everybody's property can have an ADU of a certain size. And I just want to figure out what size would you be more comfortable, the city, the staff be more comfortable if we were at 450 or 425, so that we're not requesting 126 square feet, we're requesting a smaller amount. And again, it's not our job to design this. But we're talking about trying to understand, like, if we're to help this applicant to achieve a closer alignment with the rules, then I'd like to understand from the staff's point what they think is smaller. And I do have a hard time with that changing someone's house structure unless you're like, oh, this porch is enormous, it's dilapidated, they should be replacing it anyway, so let's reduce that. So can you talk about what might be more reasonable? I hope you can't hear the grandchildren screaming in the background, but I'm good, even though they are.
I can't hear anything, so you're good to go. And when it comes to what is the minimum lot size, we actually don't have an answer. That was just more of we wanted to bring the idea or the question up with the board so the board could discuss it. And this actually might be a good question to present to the applicant in terms of what the proposal tonight, how exactly is this the minimum? Can it be reduced? The answer may be no. And also, what would it take to do something like removing existing building coverage? It's a really nice porch on the back of the house, I'll admit that. So further reducing it may not be feasible. It may not be something, but it is more something that staff wanted to make aware of the board. And this is what we do when we come up with our recommendation, is we evaluate, is it possible to do something like reduction in building coverage? Or is it possible to reduce the size of the ADU? The answer may be no, but that is a question that should probably be presented to the applicant and for the board to discuss with the applicant. So that's kind of where staff was coming from.
Thank you.
If there aren't any more questions for Robbie, we could we can plunge into the applicant's presentation. Nope. Any more questions? Okay, Harry or Stephen, I don't know who wants to take the lead on presenting?
I'm going to take the lead on presenting. Hi, I'm Lisa Larson. I have lived in Boulder since 1995. I'm going to jump in because there's 3 of us and we don't have a lot of time. So sorry if I'm rushing in. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as I was saying, I moved to Boulder in 1995. I live at 1419 Mapleton Avenue, and I am a design consultant for Olera Homes, and they are the manufacturer of the ADU that we are trying to put on this property. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, because I have some slides that I think might help some of the questions that Drew brought up and others about the building coverage metrics. It looks like I don't have access to share.
And Thomas, if we could get Lisa
Yeah,
access.
give me just one moment. I'll get to it.
Thank you.
Lisa, you should see the share icon now.
Got it. Okay, so as Robbie mentioned, a couple things. This house was built in 1946. It was purchased by our clients Harry and Mary Schulman in 2017. It is in RL1 zoning. The lot area is 6,227.9 square feet, which puts our max allowable building coverage at 2,295 square feet. The existing footprint of the residence is a small, just under 1,500 square feet. The front porch is 185 square feet, and the rear deck over 30 inches above grade is 242 square feet. It's actually 266 square feet, but there's a small 24 square foot area that's exempt because it's in an overhang from the upper level above. So it's considered exempt based on the building coverage exemptions. And then there's a rear stair landing that accesses that rear deck that's over 30 inches, and that's 18 square feet. So our total existing building coverage is 1944 square feet. And then our proposed building coverage includes all of that, plus the proposed ADU of 477 square feet. The proposed ADU deck is 0 square feet because it is less than 30 inches above grade. We specifically spent a lot of time and energy and civil planning to push the ADU down as much as we could to create less height on the building itself as well as that deck area. This is the ADU floor plan, which we can jump into more about it being kind of the minimum size that the owners would like for living in this. And this is a kind of a rendering of what it would look like from the front. So I want to dive into the building coverage definitions and exemptions because I don't think we can fully understand what is happening here without really understanding the history of building coverage. So in 2009, 2010, the city implemented compatible development rules. And this is a slide that was taken from the last city council meeting before it was implemented about why why compatible development was being implemented. And it was because we were seeing these large houses being developed in neighborhoods with small houses next to them. And the concern was that we were going to be changing the character of these neighborhoods and not for the better. So these blue envelopes, if you can see that, that's kind of like what was allowed before compatible developments was implemented. So you could basically max out the lot with your entire structure. So that brings us to the building coverage standards, which we've looked at. And there are 2 that on this property that really impact how much coverage we have. One of which we've been focusing on, which is the back deck. And we can take a look at that right now. So the back deck is actually only 260 square feet, 66 square feet, of which this 24 square foot area is covered. So that's exempt. The back deck is 58 inches above grade to 51 inches above grade. So we did look at removing portions of this deck, which makes it really uninhabitable. Like, it's not that big. It's only 12 feet wide by 20 feet long. So if you start to take 126 square feet out of this, you have this tiny sliver, or you have this, it becomes almost ridiculously small for a usable outdoor space. In addition, we talked about lowering it so that it was less than 30 inches above grade, which then requires Harry and Mary to have to multiple steps down to get on this deck, which is not ideal for, as we age, the stair is an issue. And it's also an unnecessary expense to basically deconstruct and rebuild a perfectly good deck. So that's kind of what we've looked at with the deck. I think the other thing, and this is why we ended up here, is typically, so the building coverage is for the whole lot. It's not just for one structure or one porch or the other. And I think there might be some confusion there. We would have been able to take, and what I thought when we submitted is that the front porch, this 300 square foot exemption, we could take that. So that front porch is 185 square feet, right? And I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the front porch. So we submitted with this as an exemption. The city came back to us and said, oh, by the way, the definition of a front porch means, this is clipped from the code, a covered, unenclosed, except for railing structure that projects from the exterior wall of a principal building, has no floor space above, and is intended to provide shelter to the entry of the building and a supplemental outdoor living area. So they basically are saying you can't take that exemption because this is not considered a front porch by definition because it has floor space above. It's very different than this, which is also a front porch that has floor space above. So we did consider and discussed at length, and including in conversations with plan reviewers at the city, if we were to remove these railings, make this a roof, so you'd have to remove the decking, add roofing material, and then make these doors either windows or make them inoperable, and then it could be considered a front porch and we could take the 185 square foot exemption. That just doesn't it's not very feasible, and it really changes sort of the charm of this historic structure. So that wasn't an ideal path forward for the project. I think lastly, I think it's interesting that there's a nuance to the BOZA staff level review for building coverage, which we also tried to pursue, taking this 200 square foot building coverage exemption, but that's only if this structure were quote unquote attached. So this is being understood as, or interpreted as 200 square feet for an existing single family dwelling. Because it's a detached dwelling or a detached structure, it then is not applicable to get that 200 square foot exemption. But if you think about it logically, building coverage is about the whole lot. It's about how much building area is covering the lot. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, it just doesn't add up to me. We are in compliance with all of the other compatible development regulations, including building floor area ratio, side yard bulk plane, side yard wall articulation, and furthermore, building height, solar, all of the rest. So we are asking for, I think, a very minimal amount of relief to put this structure on this lot. And then I think I should turn it over to Stephen. if he's here.
Stephen is with us in the room as a panelist.
So he should be able to take,
Yeah, he should be able to come on camera and speak.
It still looks like
He's
he's
still
muted.
on mute, yeah.
It doesn't look like he's changed. Does he have to accept something? There you go.
Check. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
I see there's only 4 minutes and 57 seconds left. I had a 7-minute discussion and Harry would like to talk as well. So I don't know what to do here, but
Oh, excuse me,
there's
Stephen.
very
can
little
you-
time left. But
can
could
you
you put
first-
up the photos of the house and I'll just dive into it and we'll see if
Can
somebody
you
can.
identify, Stephen, could you please identify yourself for the record and
Yes.
your address? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Sparn, 2505 Walnut. I'm here as a friend of Harry Schulman and Mary Haskins. I'm an architect familiar with Boulder's land use regulations and variance criteria. I've reviewed the issues and have been asked to offer my perspective on the merits of the application. This is a modest request and I support it strongly. The applicant asked for 126 square feet of building coverage to modest to allow a 477 square foot detached ADU. It's not an oversized house or a speculative development. It's a small ADU intended to support a real family housing need, provide appropriate housing for Mary and Harry's daughter, and help them remain in their home over time. The technical issue is building coverage. The definition of building coverage already includes several automatic exclusions: low decks, stoops, patios, terraces, stairways, certain balconies, porch areas, and roof overhangs. In other words, the code already recognizes that not every open exterior element should be treated the same as an enclosed building mass. This coverage issue is being driven by a modest ADU on a steep slope. I was going to talk about the front porch. I think Lisa covered it. But most importantly, in the backyard, there is a separate hardship created by the site itself. This lot drops significantly from front to rear. Because that grade change, the main floor of the existing house sits roughly 4 feet above. The existing rear deck is not excessive. It provides necessary safe and functional access from the house to the yard. But because the deck is more than 30 inches above grade, it counts as building coverage. The deck is only about 18 inches above the threshold. But that small dimensional difference has a significant zoning consequence. On a flatter site, the same ordinary rear yard access would likely be provided by a patio, terrace, low deck without counting towards building coverage. On this lot, the physical topography makes ordinary access from the house to the rear part of the covering problem. That is a hardship. It's physical, site-specific, and was not created by Harry or Mary. Just as importantly, the requested relief creates no meaning adverse impact. The ADU is located in the rear yard. It does not create excessive massing. It does not materially block views or impair privacy. And the immediate adjacent neighbors, the people most directly affected, support the application. The support matters because the building coverage standard is intended to protect open space, sky access, views, and privacy. The code recognizes that relatively small amounts of building coverage relief may warrant streamlined consideration in circumstances. There is an available staff level administrative variance of 200 square feet for coverage relief. I understand that staff concluded that this provision does not apply because the ADU, rather than attached modification to the house. However, building coverage addresses the area and the massing development across the total property. The requested relief is only 126 square feet, less than 200 square feet eligible for the administrative relief in the circumstances. For the purposes of numerical building coverage calculation, the same 126 square feet of lot area is covered whether it's attached to the house or contained within a small attached ADU. The distinction may procedurally, and I understand staff's reading, but the larger BOZA question is whether this small amount of additional coverage creates any meaningful impact on open space, sky access, views, privacy, or neighborhood character. Here it does not. You may also hear the question, why not simply make the ADU 120 square feet smaller? The practical answer is that 351 square feet would not meet the family's need. You saw how I've never seen such an efficient little unit. It's essentially 20 by 20. It would not meet the family's needs for a functional one-bedroom ADU. And also, it's standardized. It's an affordable modular unit, not a custom building that can be reduced by 126 feet without compromising its function and affordability. Should I keep going? I've got just a minute left. Reducing. Okay, it's up to the board.
I was going to say, Deshauna, can you step in? Does Katie and Jill have the ability to extend by a certain amount of time? And can we let Stephen speak a little longer?
I've got a minute left, and Harry would like to talk.
Thank you. So the BOZA procedural rules do indicate that our time limits are general standards, and they can be modified by a specific action of the chair at the meeting. It's open-ended as to how much additional time can be granted. That is up to the discretion of the chair. For clarity, who is acting as chair right now? Because I see Katie's name is listed as chair. I know Jill is our normal chair. And so one of you needs to make a decision about how much time you think, if any, should be relayed to the applicant to continue presenting.
Katie, you're still chair as of right now.
Okay. I'm fine with granting Stephen the minute to finish his presentation, and then give Harry a couple minutes to finish up as well. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I'll continue. I'll be done very shortly. So reducing the ADU size does not address the real source of the problem. The issue is not that Harry and Mary are trying to overbuild the lot. The issue is the coverage calculation is being affected by existing site conditions, necessary open exterior access elements, and technical code thresholds. This is where BOZA's role is important. Staff has to administer the code. I respect that. But BOZA exists because the code cannot anticipate every site condition or every reasonable circumstances. If this project fit neatly into the code, we would not be here. In my view, the board has two reasonable paths to approval. First, it may determine that the existing front porch should receive the coverage exclusion. It's not counted, or it doesn't count because it's got a railing on it. The code exclusions reflect concern with actual physical impacts, and those impacts are minimal. Second, if the board does not accept the porch interpretation, it can still approve the variance request. The site conditions meet the criteria for approval. The unusual physical circumstances is a steep grade change from front to rear, which places the main floor well above the rear yard and requires elevated access. The reasonable use is the ability to add a small detached ADU that supports a real family housing need, aging in place, and Boulder's stated housing goals. The hardship was not created by the owners. The slope, the house, and the elevated access condition all predated this application, and the request is minimal, 126 square feet. So in conclusion, this is a small neighborhood-supported ADU for a real family need. It does not harm the neighborhood. It does not impair adjacent property. It simply allows Harry and Mary to make reasonable use of their home and property. Boulder says that it wants ADUs, aging in place, multi-generational housing, and modest infill. This proposal advances those goals responsibly. I ask the board not to let a technical coverage calculation defeat a modest project consistent with the ordinance purposes and Boulder's housing goals. This is the kind of case where BOZA can apply practical judgment and provide appropriate relief. I respectfully urge you to approve the application. Thank you.
Okay, Harry, do you want to offer a few comments?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for hearing our appeal for the variance. Steve and Lisa, thank you. Both Steve and Lisa do mention why we kind of want that to have the ADU, and I just want to go into that just a little bit. about a couple of years ago, my daughter in New York lives in an apartment, and she has a dog, and it's a great dog. And the dog has a problem. It barks. So we've had to take the dog here, and the dog lives with us. And every time my daughter comes and visits, it's like love at first sight again. It's a beautiful thing. And funny enough, the dog's name is Argus. And I guess Odysseus movie or Ulysses movie is coming out, and Argus is probably the most loyal dog in all of writing and literature. So then we thought, then we thought, well, wouldn't it be great if our daughter can live here in the ADU or in some building? We didn't even know about ADUs or anything like that. You know, we knew about like little casitas and things like that. And then we ran across Olera, and it looked like a perfect solution. And also mentioned a disability, a future disability, but who knows? Who knows how quickly we will age? Who knows what will happen? And I know it's speculative in a sense, but if you can do something now to mitigate something that is going to happen, you know, the only thing certain in life is that we're young now, but we will get older. So I think that's part of it. So I want to thank the board for your consideration again and humbly ask you to grant our variance. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Harry.
You're welcome.
Does anyone on the board have questions for the applicant? Okay.
Can we come back to that after we have discussion? We can ask again, right, Katie?
My understanding was that we completed all our questions to the applicant and then did board discussion. But Deshauna, you can correct me if I've got that wrong.
My understanding is in line with yours, Katie. Once the board is closed for deliberations, typically the conversation is limited to just the board amongst itself, and no further questions would be posed to the applicant or staff.
Okay. So Jill, do you wanted to get a question in now?
I do. Thank you. So the Olera would like to know what other options there are that they build in that I assume you looked at for a smaller footprint. I just want to make sure that we understand. I do understand the value in having a prefab, but I'd like some specific information. And I think this question is for Lisa, right? On the Olera, what other models they have, if this is a custom model, some more explanation about that, please.
Sure. I can't speak to everything that they have just because I don't have all of that information. I do know that they have, and I don't know if they've ever made a smaller unit than this. They definitely have a larger unit than this. The smaller unit, I believe, does not have a kitchen. It may not have a bathroom, and it's basically just like an open box with no kitchen, as far as I know. And I'm happy to get more information on that, but that's what I know currently. I've only seen bigger unit. I've seen this unit and I've seen larger units than this. They have one that's like 735 square feet. And this one's 477.
Okay. I mean, there appear to be other options. But it I understand if you don't know, so that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
If I can,
the applicant?
Madam Chair, if I can kind of answer that, we were provided with the three modulars, and I believe that it's put together. You know, there's one section and two sections, and they do have one which is probably it's half the size of the 400 square foot one because they're basically two rectangular boxes put together. So to answer your question, it's basically half the size, and you really can't live in 200 square feet. You know, it doesn't serve anyone's purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have a
Craig, Drew, Sean?
I have a quick question for the applicants. Have there been any studies or schematics done for the cost and potential work for, say, first converting the front porch into, or the front deck into a porch with a roof, as well as reducing the deck, just to see how much that would cost and what would be entailed on doing that?
Yeah, we have looked at that, and I don't know if they have like an actual budget number, but it was not desirable to the owners for the multitude of reasons, either option.
Got it. Thank you, Lauren. Lisa.
Drew or Craig, any questions? Okay. Well, in that case, we can move to any public comment. I don't know if Thomas, are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, this is the opportunity for the public comment for this item. If there's anybody from the public that would wish to speak to this, please go ahead and raise your hand, and you would have 3 minutes to speak. And I'm not seeing any hands shooting up right away. So
Okay.
with that, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Well, with that, we can move to board discussion. And I guess we'll start with Craig. Do you sort of have some initial takes on the application?
Sure, yeah. So I think my kind of initial take, or at least the piece that I'm kind of piecing together in my mind, is how to satisfy the BOZA condition for 1A for physical conditions and disabilities. I think it's an either or, so 1A I or 1A II. I don't think that I think I hear kind of the potential future impact of a disability. But I think I agree with city staff that I'm not sure that there is a physical disability affecting the owners of the property. So I'm kind of hesitant on the 1A II. And for the unusual physical circumstances of the lot, I do think that there is a little bit of a grade. And I think you can kind of see that in the photos where the deck sits above. And I hear kind of the applicant's perspective of if the lot was higher, then that deck would be exempt and this wouldn't be a problem. But I'm kind of struggling to see is that criteria actually satisfied? So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now, is trying to figure out, is that criteria being met for the application? Not sure if other people have thoughts on that.
Sean?
Yeah. So I actually think specifically H1A1, I do think it satisfies that for 2 reasons. One, it is a substandard lot size, and because it's a substandard lot size, that's actually what's triggering the need for the variance. If it was not a substandard lot size, they wouldn't need to come before us on it. And number 2 on that, because the lot has a grade, it's making that deck, which is at the same level as the ground level of the house, it's effectively making that part of the lot coverage. Whereas if that was a completely flat lot, that same exact deck would not be sitting so high and thus would not contribute to that. And I looked at, an aerial view of the neighborhood. I do see a lot of ADU, what appear to be ADUs. Maybe they're garages and backyards. Now, I'm not sure what those specific conditions are. Maybe they don't have as much lot coverage or there's not a grade. But, it does seem to be a lot of other neighbors in the neighborhood have somehow found a way to make it work. Um, Now, what I am kind of torn on, what city staff pointed out was H1C and also H5C. In that, I do think it's possible for some modifications to be made. They may not be feasible and they may create additional hardship for the applicants. For example, I do see that the front deck could be repurposed into a front porch. But in my opinion, that one seems like it would create a big hardship. It would require substantially reworking the whole front of the house. However, the back deck, it could be possible to either cut that size in half or maybe keep the full deck size but lower it. And maybe instead of stairs, create a ramp or something where that bump out is. Again, since I'm not, an architect or a designer, that may be less feasible than I'm thinking, but I would be curious to see, from the applicant actual renderings of if they were to try that, what that could look like. And if that is indeed not feasible or creating too many hardships, I think that would then provide a good argument as for why they can't reduce the deck size. But until I see that, I'm still kind of unsure if the request satisfies H1C and H5C, but I do think it satisfies H1A.
Thanks, Sean. That was great. Drew?
Yeah. Actually, I'm also struggling with the H1AI on it being an unusual physical circumstance. To the point of the minimum lot coverage, it actually, what matters is the percentage of coverage, right? So a 7,000 square foot lot is only allowed 35% coverage, and actually the smaller lot that they have, you get 37%. You get more percentage. So I'm not sure if that actually helps them. But yeah, I guess I'm struggling with they have a 10, 11-foot drop across 125 feet. That's not that onerous. And it's a pretty common amount of drop. But I also do recognize that, we're talking about a lot of open spaces, right? Accounting for building coverage being the deck as well as that front porch area. And now I understand that that front porch is not exempt because it is a living or a space that you use on the upper floor. Yeah, that's the criteria that I'm struggling to get across. So
Okay. Jill, you want to offer some thoughts?
Well, it's not an easy one because there's a lot of complexity layered in here. I really appreciate what everybody said because I think for me, I'm in the same place. I hear a piece of what each of you are saying affects my observation as well. I hear the reluctance on staff just because they've gone through several aspects where they are struggling with this application. When I look at custom building versus buying something that's prefab, I looked online at Olera. I do see that this is their 490 square foot model. On here, it says it's 477. So they're, and perhaps they made some slight modification that reduced its overall size. We're trying to balance, how much building coverage affects this lot. How, when you take one lot and you compare it to another lot, if it's flat, there are different situations. But when you buy a lot, you know that if you have a slope of 11 feet, there are going to be some impacts on how you use it. There are more stairs, so that aging in place is an interesting question. I don't see that a ramp would solve that problem, Drew, because a ramp is still going to be treated the same way as a stair, and a ramp generally takes up more space. I feel like from my history on the board, what's difficult here is that we don't have all the full analyses. So sometimes when somebody brings a project to us like this, they can show us how each potential option that staff has raised doesn't work for them and doesn't work for this lot. And here's more in words than pictorially. And I think that's fair to say, although I certainly can imagine it. I can imagine a small house to begin with. So for me, when you're looking at a small house to begin with, I'm not sure it's an unreasonable request. But when you tie in that upper deck, that because of the code, and Deshawn, you probably have to help us with that. But when you're talking about, often those balconies simply aren't used. So one question I have is it used? If it's not used, is there a hardship in converting it? What would it take to convert it? Does it mean removing the railing and just putting flat roof on there? How much of a hardship is that? Well, I don't know because I don't really have enough information. Like if you told me it's a $50,000 expenditure, I'd be like, that's a lot of money. If it was a $7,000 to $10,000 expenditure, I'd be like, well, in order to get your ADU, is that more fair? And so if I don't have a one way or the other here, I definitely can be convinced one way or the other, but it sounds like we're kind of all struggling to want to help this family at the same time. The one other issue I want to talk about is I know that I have a house with an ADU, and my husband always says, well, we can just go live there. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to go live in 400 square feet. Now, a caretaker could live in 400 to 500 square feet, and I understand that. But for homeowners to go from 1,500 to 400, I don't think that's practical. But there may be, that argument could be stated in a different way, and that's what I'm saying. There's different ways of presenting this so that maybe we could more easily get over the hurdle. Like that's what I feel like the city staff was saying. Well, show us why it's too expensive. Show us why it's too small. I mean, my ADU doesn't have, I think the total is 550 square feet, and it has a stairwell that you have to go up, and that's included in that square footage. So you can go a little smaller and be functional. Maybe your kitchen doesn't have an island in it. Maybe your kitchen is just smaller. So if we're taking a straw poll, I think it certainly feels like some of us are one way, some of us the other way, and we're really uncertain. And that's where I sit right now. I need more persuasion. I don't know where you are, Katie.
Well, I feel like I'm the only one who I actually am pretty persuaded by the applicant's presentation. And I believe I don't feel the ambiguity. I am pretty persuaded that they have met H1 AI and II, as well as the H1C, I guess, and H5C. I'm pretty persuaded that any of the potential modifications that we're talking about just aren't reasonable, and would be sort of an unnecessary expense. Things like adding this, in order to lower the deck, adding the steps from the unit doesn't seem a feasible thing to me. And certainly as you get older, adding those steps in isn't great. I feel like the ADU itself already is of modest size, so trying to make it any smaller doesn't seem reasonable. I do feel like I feel like the conditions of the lot are unusual enough, with the grade change, and that it's a substandard sized lot. All of that to me seems to satisfy that H1, H1A, I guess, I criteria. So all of that said, I'm not feeling the ambiguity. I feel that these applicants have met the criteria. So I would be in favor of approving this application. But it sounds like all of you maybe need a little more persuasion. It's just, for me, if it were left up to me, I believe that they have satisfied all of the criteria necessary for a variance. So I don't know where we go from here, if we feel ready to take a vote.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
my apologies, I did not mean to interrupt, but
No.
I had raised my, thank you. I had raised my hand because I wanted to address the board before a vote was taken, because there are some implications for the board's actions and what could happen going forward. I just wanted to put that on the record beforehand. And so hypothetically, let's say the board votes and denies the application. I want the board to be aware of the fact that BOZA rules state that no similar application can be considered by this board for a 1-year period. So that's something to be cognizant of. The actions today would have limitations on the applicant's ability to come back and with a different application or more detail. That being said, the board does, if it would like to do so, it does not have any obligation to do so. This hearing could be continued by the board itself, if we have the requisite number of votes to do so, of course. If the board feels that there's good cause for a continuance, I've heard some desire maybe for more information, and so I say that to say, prior to taking a formal vote, perhaps the board would like to consider the year-long limitation on reapplying to BOZA and maybe entertain a continuance if so desired.
Right, that's helpful, Deshauna. I guess
Can you not see my hand raised?
I'll leave it to you all whether you don't feel comfortable making a definitive vote at this point and would prefer to continue the application to the next meeting or meeting after that.
Madam Chair, Jill has her hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Jill.
I'm sorry, it doesn't look like you can see me when I raise my hand. I was going to bring up what Deshauna was saying, that it's only fair to the applicant for us to explain the voting rules, but I'm also not completely clear where everybody stands. So, and I don't want to run the meeting ahead of you, Katie. I appreciate you stepping in for sure. So I am on the fence. I said I was on the fence, and I could be persuaded either way. I think the argument is, will we get any new information other than reinforcement of what Lisa presented already and what Stephen added to? And I think for me, if I were to look at it a little bit more of a long view, I thought that knowing the neighborhood, knowing the aerial shots that I think Drew mentioned, or maybe it was Craig, but there are a lot of garages, and some of those date back, earlier than the 2009, I think it is, law that went into place. So I do think 477 square feet is in the neighborhood of minimum 450. I definitely could live with that, but being a builder of many years, I understand what they've gone through and understand it's more efficient to build with a prefab unit, and a 20 by 20 makes sense. And I struggle with that back deck, because really in my mind, the back deck is a problem and the upper roof. And do we contort the law, the ordinance, or do we just do what boards can do? We have the right to say, like Katie's saying, they've fundamentally met the criteria. I'm okay with it. And my question is anybody else okay with it? Can they be persuaded, or do we need to ask them if they want to continue? So I think I'd need more of an answer, from everybody else. Katie, you can persuade me, but we're two. And if the other 3 board members are on the fence or not willing, want to turn it down, then it has to go to the applicant for, if we're going to offer a continuance. I'm willing to offer a continuance as well.
Yeah, and I think we should try to come to a conclusion here. Also, let's deliberate more because continuance has a large cost to the applicant as well as us meeting again, and to the city. I am also on the fence. It's, I think Jill put it well. I'm struggling to get across the criteria, but I feel like this is something that is could be in the purview of BOZA, but I'm struggling to get across. I guess I'm stuck on the unusual characteristic of the lot. And so maybe if we just talk a little bit more, we can somehow get across that line. I guess, yeah, Sean and Craig, are you on the fence, or are you thinking this is not
Yeah,
not meeting?
I guess I'm on the fence as well. I think Sean, I appreciate your answer there for the 1AI. I think it helped sway me a little bit, but I'm still not fully swayed on that 1AI. And I think you actually raised a good point on 5C on modifications. I think with the front porch, I think the back deck, I think potentially, I think someone else had mentioned potentially a 2-story ADU. Not an architect, but I think more information there could persuade me. So I think kind of agree that like a continuation wouldn't be ideal, but I think a continuation could help the applicant kind of show why those aren't valid options to help push 5C in my mind. Kind of on the fence, currently leaning towards no. My question, I am kind of new to BOZA, but I was under the under kind of impression that it had to meet all of the specific criterias in order for it to be approved. That is true, correct?
Well, Robbie, you probably need to explain that in the sense that our job is to, if it met all the criteria, it wouldn't be here. Right? So it's hard. That's why I'd rather Robbie answered that question. And Robbie, I wasn't sure if chat worked. I was asking if you could put the hardship clause up again, so that we can look at the exact language in writing in front of us. And maybe could you explain better than I can to Craig, and maybe Deshawn can help as well, in terms of what our job is as BOZA when it doesn't meet the criteria, or when we're not agreeing with staff. And staff isn't going to agree with every application. So go ahead.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was on mute. I thought I still was. And Deshauna, you can talk about BOZA's job and what they can and cannot do, but what I can touch on, and this is what you wanted on the screen, correct, Jill? I just want to make sure that as well.
Yes.
Okay. So for Craig, pretty much H states, and I'm going to read it right off of the page, says BOZA may grant a variance if it finds that the application satisfies all of the applicable requirements of paragraph H1, H2, H3, or H4 of this section, and the requirements of H5 of this section. 90% of the variances you see respond to H1 and H5. It's just the more common. So what this is saying is, in order for the board to be able to approve something, it has to find that the specific request satisfies, in this case, all of H1, which includes H1, A, B, C, D, and also all of H5, which includes H5, A, B, C, D. So 8 criteria total. And the board has to find that all 8 of those criteria are met in order for an approval to be granted. And Deshauna, if you want to add on to that, correct me, or change the way, please feel free to.
No corrections. I agree with how you have laid out the expectation for a BOZA hearing to approve all of the criteria that is being addressed by the applicant must be met. I heard a comment saying that if all the criteria was met, we would not be having this hearing now. A nuance is that there are some administrative level variances that staff can process outside of a formal hearing like this, but there are certain like size thresholds or scope of the variance that triggers that, and I don't think none of this could have been done administratively. It merited coming before the board. It did not fit into the administrative box.
And that is correct. And just kind of play off of what you just said, there is an administrative path, but it's only for modifications to a main dwelling unit, not accessory buildings. So that 200 square foot administrative relief only applies to principal buildings.
And not to interrupt, but to be fully transparent, I am receiving a direct message from the applicant. And the applicant is wanting to be allowed to speak during the board deliberations since staff has been called upon to speak. Our rules are not directly on point here, and so I am bringing this to the board's attention. I don't think that the applicant has an outright ability to contribute during deliberations, but the board may disagree with that and think that they should be allowed to add to this conversation. Our rules mostly talk about time limits and giving extra time. My perception of right now, where the staff is speaking, is that we are clarifying the role of the board and what the code says. We are not opining on the substantive components of the variance application. But all that being said, I want to make the board aware that this communication has just now been relayed to me, and that's where we're at.
Well, first of all, for this item, am I still chair or is Jill chair? Or,
You
I'm
are,
still-
Katie.
Okay. So, you know, so what I took from all of that is that, you know, they want to add something, but it seems inappropriate since this is sort of the board's discussion section, to allow the applicant further comment. Is there nuance in that? Robbie, have you ever had that situation before?
I think if there is an urgent question that only the applicant can speak to as a part of the board's deliberation, maybe in the past there have been times when they've asked a very specific question, or if, say, the board moves forward with a continuance, typically they reach out to the applicant to ask, hey, is this okay? Is there any question? So if there's just a general comment being made by the applicant, typically the board does not open it back up to that discussion. But if the board has specific questions, or if it's a part of possibly them formulating their motion, then I believe in the past the board has asked a very specific question of the applicant. So that is ultimately up to you as the chair and the remaining board members.
Okay. I mean, the way I see it currently is that I think Jill and I would be inclined to vote yes on this application. So the three of you, Sean, Drew, and Craig, are the ones that I feel like still have some questions. So if the three of you believe that an additional comment from the applicant would be helpful in moving you one way or the other, you know, I'm for having the applicant add a comment. If everybody is in agreement with that. Yes?
I don't have a specific question for the applicant. I think, you know, interested in what Sean has to say. I think all of us kind of gave our strawman poll. I'd like to hear what Sean's strawman poll is as well. But yeah, I don't have a specific question for the applicant.
Okay. Sean, are you good, or do you have something specific you want to clarify that might help move you?
Oh, okay. Well, did you hold up your hand and request? They said the applicant raised their hand.
Steve, you may be on
on the call.
I believe we have Steven speaking, so
I think they're
Sorry,
saying
that was a
they're
mistake.
not asking to
Stephen
speak. So,
Stephen went to call me, and somehow it got hooked on to the Zoom. Pardon. Sorry.
so
Sean, Sean, do you have, is there anything further that would, clarification that would help you in your decision-making process?
Not a specific question for right now. Should I go ahead and just state how I'm thinking, how everyone else on the board did?
Yeah, I mean, if we're okay just on the issue of, any further clarification from the board or from the applicant. I mean, if all members of the board are okay with the level of applicant, explanation at this point, then I think it seems to be we're at the stage where we can just kind of take a little straw poll and see where we are.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't have any right now questions for the applicants.
Okay.
I guess maybe I'll just say something. I've been thinking about this and rereading the H1A1 or AI. And I'm focusing on the other physical conditions peculiar to the affected property. I mean, I do think that this house is peculiar in the sense that it has the deck above the front porch, and thus the front porch is not exempt. It also is peculiar with its back deck, how it would be difficult to reduce the height and so I guess thinking through it, and also I guess the cantilevered exemption, if it didn't have the pillars in the front, it would be cantilevered and it wouldn't count either, but it would be the same bulk. And so I don't know. I guess I'm leaning a little bit towards yes now. Just kind of focusing on that. I like to try to follow the criteria as close as possible. And so I think it does meet H1AI, and that was the one I was struggling to get across. I don't know. Just wanted to add that.
and can I go behind that? I feel like, Drew, that was a great explanation because that's, this unusual, it's such an interplay on this site. And I'm just trying to understand, first of all, we'd all have, at least three of us have to agree it's an unusual circumstance. I really appreciated Craig pointing out that this is a requirement and that it's how we get there. I guess that's what I was sort of fudging around, is like, well, how do we get there? So if you put it up one more time, Robbie, I just want to make sure that I'm interpreting it correctly, because I'm not sure, Deshawn, when it says the lot and the hardship and the topography, but they're impacted by the structure. So the topography is forcing the structure to have a raised back deck. And is that under unusual physical circumstances or conditions, including without limitation? So without limitation, that's a hard word to say, irregularity, narrowness or shallowness of the lot, or exceptional topography or other physical conditions peculiar to the affected property. I'm comfortable with it just with that back deck, because otherwise you would be walking out on grade if it was level. So I just wanted to say thank you, Drew, for the way you explained it. And I think in order to say yes, at least three of us have to agree with that criteria, because it's clear, thank you for the rereading, that they must satisfy all of the applicable requirements of that paragraph H. So I'm good with it. That's it.
Jill, were you wanting me to opine on the interpretation of that criteria?
I'm suggesting that it is an option for you to opine on it, or to just say, that's fine, whatever, the way I said it. I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding the nuance.
I do not think you are misunderstanding the nuance. I think that the interpretation that has been relayed is a reasonable one.
Thank you.
So it sounds like Katie, myself, and Jill would be in favor.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if it seems like that, it seems that we're ready to go ahead and take a vote. it- So,
Can I think Sean, I'd like to hear Sean's perspective if possible. If you're up for it, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm, was someone who's kind of on the fence, but leaning yes. Definitely, I don't want to deny it, and make them wait a year. If the board were to vote, not in favor, I would want a continuance for the applicant to bring in more information on why, modifying the deck and everything would present additional hardship. But I do definitely think it meets, the criteria of H1AI. So in which case, I am leaning towards in favor.
And to be
Okay.
clear, my comment earlier was that yeah, we should try to come to a conclusion today, but if we can't, we would do a continuance. So just to clarify my earlier comment.
And Sean, you had a point earlier on 5C. Has your perspective there changed?
So my perspective has been always a little bit, iffy on that. I do think it would create a hardship for the applicant to rebuild, say, the deck. It would cost a lot of money. It would, um, reduce the level of, enjoyment out on the deck. You know, could it possibly be modified? Yes. But would it be, I do think it would create some form of hardship and additional expense to the applicant, to modify either the front porch or deck. So I would say, with that, I could see it satisfying, H5C.
Okay, so at this stage, I think we're ready. Does someone want to offer a motion? I certainly can do it, but
Drew, will you do it?
Yeah.
I'll second it if you do it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve BOZ 2026-00005.
And I'll second that motion. Do we have to say
Great.
anything else because it meets criteria and so on, or can we just say that?
As long as we capture on the record that the board finds that all criteria has been met, that would be sufficient.
So you might want to add that, Drew, just,
That all criteria have been met.
so second. Katie, you're on.
Okay, Craig, you want to offer your vote?
I'll vote in favor.
Okay, and Sean?
I vote in favor.
Okay, and I vote in favor.
And the rest of us.
I vote in favor.
And Jill, I as well. Yeah.
So after all that, it looks like everyone approved it. So Lisa and Stephen and Harry, thanks for your patience and for your presentation and for addressing all our questions. And sounds like the application is approved.
Thank you. Stephen has his hand up, but I'm guessing, Stephen, you'd like to say thank you and you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the presentation.
And thank you,
Good luck with it.
Mary. Thank you.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to the second item, and I'm happy to keep serving as chair, or Jill, if you want to jump in and claim your seat back, I'm I'm
Sure.
fine with that too.
I'm fine either way. What would you like us to do, Robbie?
Guess you two are just gonna have to battle it out for whoever's chair. But if Katie is okay remaining chair, I see no harm in that happening. Or if Jill, you want to take it back, it's up to you.
Katie's doing a great job. It's great practice. Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
All right, so now we can move on to BOZ 2026-06. This property is located at 2013 Walnut Street. It's a setback variance. So Robbie, do you want to plunge into the staff presentation?
I can't. Let me just get my screen shared real quick. Okay, again, this is docket number BOZ 2026-00006, and the address is 2013 Walnut Street. This is a setback variance. It actually includes multiple setback variances. As part of a proposal to repurpose an existing detached accessory building and to turn it into a new residence to be classified as a principal building that does not meet multiple minimum setback requirements for principal buildings in the RH2 zoning district, the applicant is requesting a setback variance to the following 4 setbacks in order to establish the new residence and building. The resulting rear north yard setback will be approximately 1.8 feet where 25 feet is required, and approximately 1.8 feet exists today. The resulting interior side west setback will be approximately 0.25 feet where 10 feet is required, and approximately 0.25 feet exists today. The resulting interior side east setback will be approximately 3.7 feet where 10 feet is required, and approximately 3.7 feet exists today. And the resulting combined side yard setback will be approximately 3.9 feet where 20 feet is required, and approximately 3.9 feet exists today. Section of the land use code to be modified, section 971, Boulder Revised Code 1981. And we have another not typical variance, but I will do my best to go into the pertinent details. Up on the screen, you see the location of this property. It is somewhat a reverse flag lot, as we would call it, with the alley to the north or up in the image, and Walnut Street to the south. And Walnut Street is the front yard, with the alley side, the north side being the rear yard. And then it is located about 1 block south of Pearl Street, as has been detailed within the application materials. So a lot in the way of history for this one. Again, it is zoned RH2. The lot size is around 5,800 square feet. For RH2 specifically, which is not a zoning district that the board is probably accustomed to seeing in front of them, there is no minimum lot area requirement, and there is also not a minimum per dwelling unit requirement. So for RL1, for example, which is the more common zoning district that the board sees, typically there's minimum lot area per dwelling unit, and then there's also just a general minimum lot area. This does not apply. So it is not a substandard size lot because there's no minimum lot area. A little in the way of the history, the main home in the ultimate legal duplex, it is a duplex today, was permitted and built circa 1920. And based on the materials provided within the application by the applicant, this lot configuration somewhat predates the house and has been in existence for quite some time. So this is not a new situation that the board is being presented with this evening when it comes to the lot dimensions and the lot size. And then the subject detached building that is out there was constructed sometime later. And I say sometime later because it's not necessarily clear when it was built, but it is clear that it was built quite some time ago, many decades ago. This subject building has received a demolition approval from the historic team within Planning and Development Services, and that was done through HIS 24-00297, and it was deemed non-contributing. And the main house and duplex is quote unquote potentially eligible for designation. So as of today, neither structures are designated or protected, but the main home, which houses the duplex use today, is considered potentially eligible for designation. And then the subject detached building is in active review, much like the last case that the board considered. Some things were noticed during review. It was originally proposed as an ADU, but ADUs are not permitted on properties with duplexes, only, or attached housing to be more specifically. Only single family standalone dwelling units can have an ADU. And that is not something that the board can vary. So the next step was to maintain the conversion to a residential use, a habitable area versus the historic garage use. And it appears illegal housing within the building. The applicant is instead moving forward with this being a standalone dwelling unit. So a third dwelling unit on a property that currently has 2 dwelling units. And this is a principal dwelling unit. So with that, you have to move forward with the fact that, and this is where there was a lot of discussion with the applicant and amongst staff, we cannot permit a principal dwelling unit within an accessory building. So with that, this building will become classified as a principal building, which is permitted in RH2, a third principal building unit. But also with that comes that it now has to adhere to principal building setbacks, if that makes sense. So all that said, the actual use of this being converted from the historic garage to a principal building is allowed. The use is allowed, but it comes with the caveat that it now needs to adhere to principal structure setbacks. So that is why within the description, within the materials, it was made clear that there are actually 4 different setback variances that I'll go into in a little more detail here in a second. And then also staff wanted to bring up that should BOZ 06, this application, be approved, staff does recommend that the board require a 2.75 foot maintenance easement onto 1922 20th Street, which is the property just to the north and west, along that shared property line as a condition of approval, since a maintenance easement would otherwise be allowed for any setback under 3 feet. So I'll go into that specific setback here in a second. But while I was talking about the zoning, if the board were to get to an approval, it would be good to add this condition of approval, because the maintenance easement will be required for them to be able to move forward with the building permit. And then existing and proposed floor area, as well as existing and proposed open space, not building coverage, both are compliant with what the code allows. And you'll notice that open space, RH2, adheres to open space and not building coverage. So this is also one of those differences. Because of zoning district, there's slightly different requirements. And the information I have up here on the screen, which was also portrayed within the application materials, states that they are well above their allowed open space, or their minimum open space, and they're well below their proposed floor area with the reconstruction of this accessory building, possibly principal building. And then all other solar access and bulk standards, including height, no issues have been presented. Again, this has already gone through a round of review through a building permit. So when it comes to transportation engineering, building code, and especially zoning, we've been fortunate to have one look at things to see if any other issues presented. And I don't believe there are. The applicant can probably speak more to whether or not there were any other issues brought up through permit review. The big one was the kind of the use of the building, and then the subsequent setback requirements, which is why they are in front of you this evening. And this provides some existing site conditions. The 2 images on the left, the first one is the front of the house. So this is the front yard. And then the image on the back shows kind of a circled area. Hopefully some of the board members had the opportunity to walk or drive this alley. But this is a dilapidated building that has already received its demolition approval. But even when it was up and completely present, it did present somewhat of a tight squeeze for the area. but rebuilding it in the same location appears to be possible, per the already one round of building permit review. But I'll kind of leave it at that for now, but I just wanted to kind of show you the existing conditions, especially the survey that shows the existing location, the 0.25 foot setback from the west of the historic garage proposed principal dwelling unit. And then we also have the aerial showing kind of all of these conditions from above. So tonight, the board is considering 4 setbacks. The combined side setback kind of comes with the 2 side setbacks, but I still wanted to separate it out and make it clear that it also requires a setback variance. So the first one is the minimum rear north setback. And if you can see my cursor, that is the alley side, existing around 1.8 feet. The applicant has made it clear that they wish to utilize the same footprint, foundation, and some of the walls, those that can be reused or refurbished, to reconstruct this building and to turn it into a habitable space, and one that is not dilapidated like the historic garage was. So the first one is the minimum rear north setback, and that is from the alley. The second one is an interior side west setback, and that's for approximately 0.25 feet, where 10 feet is required and approximately 0.25 feet exists today. That is this wall right here. It is about 0.25 feet. And this is also the one that, should the board get to a motion of approval, staff just recommends that maybe a condition of approval for a maintenance easement be attached to it. The maintenance easement will be required regardless of there being a condition. But this just makes it clear that they will need to have this maintenance easement prior to moving forward to a building permit or to continuing the building permit. The third setback is the flip side, is the interior side east setback. And that's for approximately 3.7 feet, where 10 feet is required and approximately 3.7 feet exists today. Were this to be an actual accessory building, if this was to be refurbished as a garage and not a residence, then they could adhere to accessory structure setbacks. So this one would not necessarily present an issue in itself, but because it has to adhere to principal structure setbacks, the minimum is 10 and not 3 that you would see for a typical detached building like this. So the third one is for approximately 3.7 feet, where 10 feet is required. And then the 2 side yards combined, they are requesting a setback variance of 3.9 feet. That's the 2 sides added together, where 20 feet is required and approximately 3.9 feet exists today. So those are the 4 essentially elements or sections of the overall request that the board is considering tonight. And also up on the screen, I have the 10-foot interior side or building area for a principal structure. There was some confusion in terms of what yard is what. As mentioned, this is a reverse flag lot. Typically a flag lot, the skinny part of the flag or the pole part faces the street. This one is reverse, where that skinny part is against the backyard or the alley. So there were questions about, if you can see my cursor, this property line right here. It was assumed that this as well as this were both rear yard setbacks. That is not the case. I took this to the larger team and we discussed it, and it was determined that they only have one rear property line, which is the alley property line, and that all others, with exception of the front yard, are interior side. So with that, they're required for a principal building like this, 10 feet from the west, 10 feet from this interior north property line, and 10 feet from the east, which creates this buildable area. So without the need for a variance, a building like this would need to be put within the building envelope that I have denoted in the green dash line. And we can come back to this if needed. And then here we have, again, the site plan just zoomed in a little more, showing all of those proposed setbacks. And then we also have the floor plan and an elevation drawing of the proposed principal building. And then also, when it comes to the criteria, staff has also, and I think I have one more slide. There we go. So staff also has concerns whether or not this fully meets the criteria, and we just more wanted to bring it up to the board's attention. We do actually feel that criterion 1A(I), the first one, is being met. This is a reverse flag lot. It has been in this configuration for many years, possibly up to 100 years plus. So we feel that this is somewhat a unique circumstance in terms of the dimensions of the lot. There is no minimum lot size, but it is also not an incredibly large lot to where there would be more of a buildable area on the lot. So we feel that 1A is being met, as well as 1B. These conditions are not typical for any zoning district, especially the RH2. And for the sake of conversation, RH2 is intended to allow for more denser residential development. So versus the RL1, which is intended for less dense development. So dense development is actually encouraged, and for the RH2 zoning district. Where our concerns come are criterion 1C and 1D. We don't necessarily feel that they are not being met. We just are questioning whether or not they are. 1C is because of such physical circumstances or conditions, the property cannot reasonably be developed in conformity with the provisions of this chapter. Again, that goes back to whether or not a by right solution is possible. We fully understand and we see why reconstruction of a building on an existing footprint that has been there for 100 plus years is preferred. They want to utilize an existing location and use, not necessarily use, but the location and the overall bulk of a building. In general, that's understandable, but staff has questions whether or not this could be done elsewhere. Feasibility is not necessarily a criteria, but reasonability is. So that's more of a question whether or not 1C is being met. Then also 1D, any unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. The applicant did not create the dimensions of the lot, but at the same time, the wish to establish a third dwelling unit, originally an accessory dwelling unit, but now a third principal dwelling unit, something that not all properties in Boulder are able to do. So we are also questioning whether or not 1D is met. We don't think necessarily that it is not being met, but we just have questions, and that's just something that the board can decide amongst themselves. And then when it comes to the criteria under 5A, B, C, and D, we didn't hear from any neighbors. So typically we take that as content without stating content. We did not at least hear any voiced concerns pending public comment that's going to follow soon after. So staff also feels that 5A, B, and C are all being met. It's really only 1C and 1D that we have questions and concerns about. So with that, I do know that the applicant and homeowner are here, so they'll be able to speak. And also, if you have any questions for me when it comes to the setback variances, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I may have missed this, but with the way they're proposing to tear down the dilapidated garage and build this new principal structure, are the dimensions exactly the same as the prior dilapidated garage? I may have missed that. I know you mentioned that they wanted to do it on the same footprint. I just didn't know if the dimensions were going to be the same.
I believe and this is more a question for the applicant, but I believe the dimensions are mostly the same, but there are discrepancies. There are differences. Okay. And what is there today, or what was there, and what is proposed. The overall bulk of the building is changing slightly, but the footprint itself is remaining the same. And I know that they would like to reestablish some of the existing walls that are there, because the building that was out there was in pretty bad condition. So not all walls, and especially the roof, can be rebuilt. So they're going to have to be new regardless. So there are differences.
Okay. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Robbie?
I do.
Yes, Jill?
Yeah, I
Jill.
do. Robbie, will you just go over again with them up there, the ones that you're having trouble with, please?
Yes. Sorry, I keep taking it down and you keep asking for it to be put back up. So my apologies. Let's see. So let's see if I can. There we go. So really, staff's concerns are 1C and 1D. And 1C is primarily because of,
We can't see the screen, Bill.
oh, it shows as shared. I'm sorry.
No problem.
If I hit share, that might help. So there you go. My apologies. So 1C and 1D, again, are where staff has concerns and questions whether or not it's truly being met. 1C primarily, and it states, because of such physical circumstances or conditions, the property cannot reasonably be developed in conformity with the provisions of this chapter. This is more, could a structure like this be reconstructed elsewhere on the property? And the answer, after talking with the applicant and after the board discussion, maybe no. But that is just more of a question and a concern that staff had. And then also, any unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. The hardship in this case is the establishment of a second dwelling unit. Originally, it was, like I mentioned, it was meant to be an ADU, but duplex properties, attached housing properties cannot have an ADU. So they were fortunate to where RH2 supports multiple principal dwelling units. So in this case, they're asking for the ADU to be a principal dwelling unit. And we were just questioning whether or not this was a self-induced hardship in terms of establishing a third dwelling unit. And that's really for the board just to further consider. So to answer your question, 1C and 1D are where staff had questions and concerns. And we felt that all of the other criteria were met.
I'm having a hard time with this one because I just don't see why. I mean, just because you can build in a certain, can I go for it, Katie? Can I? Yeah. Okay. You know, I just want to understand why you have a zoning criteria that says you can build this, but as a practical matter, you're squeezing a residential structure of 326 square feet, which we just, by the way, finished going over and discussing how 477 square feet was bare minimum. Now we have 326. So I'm like, does it make any sense? I mean, where's the yard for this person? And why would we encourage that level of density? As a garage, yeah, I get it as a garage. As a residential unit, I'm gonna have trouble with that. So maybe I'm just reacting to it. Like, are you saying that the conformity with the provision of the chapter are such that in this zoning area, you could have a third unit?
Correct. Yes, you could have one. It's just this one does not meet principal structure setbacks to establish it in the same location. But otherwise, for building coverage for floor area, it would permit a third dwelling unit. It's just the setbacks are preventing it.
And if they had a single family, it would be an ADU, but there's still setback issues, right? They'd have to come to the board for setback issues.
Correct. And I believe that, and this is probably something that the applicant can speak more directly to, but it was originally intended as an ADU without the direct knowledge that duplex properties like this cannot have an ADU. So they were fortunate enough to where there was an option B, meaning instead of an ADU, call it a principal dwelling unit, but with that comes more restrictive setbacks.
Okay. Thank you, Robbie.
You're welcome.
I also had a question. I'm not sure if it's that pertinent, but yeah, I don't fully understand why it has to be the principal residence of the lot. And I understand how that affects the front yard and rear yard. But since the setbacks are the same, does it really make a difference?
It does. So when it comes, and this is actually something I had lengthy discussion with my team. Because it is a principal building or principal residential use, you can't have an accessory dwelling unit, so it has to be a principal dwelling unit, which this property makes way for. Because of that, you can't have a principal residence within an accessory building. The definition of accessory building is to where it cannot have a principal dwelling unit. It's supposed to be accessory to the principal residence. In this case, principal residence is the duplex and proposed principal residence. So the definition of accessory building and the definition of accessory dwelling unit are completely separate.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So they're both principal residences. Both buildings will
Oh.
be.
Both buildings will be a principal residence, one of them having two, meaning the duplex, and this one being the third for the property.
Okay. Understood. Now I understand.
Craig or Sean, do either of you have questions of Robbie?
Yeah, I had two questions. While we're on this photo, I was curious if what your thoughts were for 5A. I had a minor concern of like looking at the area, there isn't much parking. And so removing a garage out of kind of that area, I was wondering about, does that alter the character of the neighborhood? Because there's not much street parking there. There's not much anything else.
That's a very valid question. So today it cannot be used as parking. It's been dilapidated. I believe that it's been used illegally as kind of a squatting area or an illegal unit. So this would not be turning it from a historically garage use to a residence would not be taking away any parking. And then also we do not have parking minimums anymore for ADUs or principal structures. So with that being said, we're not requiring parking for this property. And as it sits today, there is no parking for this property, especially within this building. So that's kind of where staff comes from when it comes to the impact of parking. With that, we do not feel that it would negatively impact the essential character of the neighborhood. We did not hear from anybody who was against it necessarily. So typically we take that as there are no concerns, or at least preliminary concerns, with its impact to the surrounding neighborhood, at least negative ones. And that's why staff feels that it does meet 5A.
Thank you. Thank you. Very helpful. And then if you go back, I didn't understand the fourth setback, the 4 combined setback.
Yes.
Where is that? What is that?
So under 971, which is where all the setback standards live, properties typically have 2 setback requirements. When it comes to the side, we have the minimum side yard. So in this case, the minimum side yard for a principal building is 10 feet. But on top of that, and this holds true for RL1 zoning districts as well, we have what we call a combined side setback. And this is why I said number 4 is kind of tied into 2 and 3. If you approve 2 and 3, you also approve 4 technically. But for this property, what we state, we call it the crisscross rule, is that both side yards for any new development need to add up to no less than 20 feet in this case. So both the number 2 setback and the number 3 setback need to add up to 20 feet for combined to be met. They're not meeting that. So they are requesting a combined side setback of 3.9 feet. That's the 3.7 plus 2.25, where 20 feet is required. So it's just another setback that they have to adhere to, but it really is tied into the number 2 and the number 3 up on the screen.
I see. Thank you.
Sean, do you have any questions for Robbie?
Yeah, quick question for Robbie. You mentioned recommending a maintenance easement be added. Where would that be added ideally?
So under 972, we have a requirement. So the requirement for structures is anything under 3 feet requires a maintenance easement. And the reason for that is to ensure that there's proper spacing for maintenance of a structure, because we do allow 0-foot setbacks in some zoning district for accessory structures. So anything under 3 feet would require a maintenance easement, and that would be essentially along the span of the building onto the property that is impacted. So this property directly to the west of the existing / proposed building would have to, they would have essentially a 2.75 foot maintenance easement onto their property. And that would have to be recorded with the county and put onto the title work. And that's mainly for structures under 3 feet to allow that spacing. Now on the flip side of that, the alley, you can see it's a 1.8 foot setback, which is less than 3. But in this case, the alley acts as the easement. So we're not going to make them put an easement onto an easement, a right-of-way easement. So the easement, the maintenance easement would only apply to the west side, and that would be onto the property to the west for 2.75 feet along the entire span of the building.
Got it. Thanks, Robbie.
I have a tag along question with that. I just like, who owns that property and can they get that easement?
That is something the applicant, I have already made them aware. They would have to get that easement onto the property owner or from the property owner. If this property owner, for some reason, disagrees, they cannot have that 0.25 foot setback. And that's why staff recommended that it just be added as a condition of approval, even though they're regardless are going to have to get that 2.75 foot easement. And if they say no, then that prevents them from being able to move forward with the building permit.
If there are no further questions of Robbie, are we ready? I assume we're ready for the applicant presentation portion.
Right, we're not getting them promoted right now.
Okay.
One quick question for Robbie. Just I quickly read through the rules. So if this was an accessory building, it would be meeting the setbacks. That's my interpretation.
For the east setback, the 3.7 foot, because it would be 3.7 where 3 is required. But it's a 0 or 3 plus, so the 0.25 would still require a variance.
Yes. Or an easement.
And an easement.
Ah, okay. So it can't be 0 or 3.
No, it's 0. If it's anything in between, the 3 foot easement becomes the difference of 3 and whatever the setback is. So because they're proposing at 0.25, it would be a 2.75 foot easement onto the property to the west.
Okay, let's move to the applicant presentation.
All right, I hope you can hear me. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Great. I'm here with my wife. My name's Greg Ekram and my wife Heidi, and we own the property. We also live at 23rd and Pine. I'm going to make this real brief. I don't have a huge presentation because this is a little bit unusual. About myself, I was actually born at Boulder Community Hospital here on Broadway, which is going to be your new city building, I gather. I've been here ever since. I went to the university. I got an environmental conservation degree. And for the last 20 years, I've been an energy consultant to investor-owned utilities. So I'm currently working with Detroit Edison, Consumers Energy, the Energy Trust of Oregon, State of Vermont, and I evaluate energy efficiency programs for their efficacy. And so that evaluator hat is going to come out in me. My wife and I bought this property about 3 years ago in the hopes that we could have some sort of a retirement income here in Boulder. The previous owner had died. The house was in really bad disrepair, but it reminded us of our home on Pine Street. The garage, unfortunately, was inhabited illegally by vagrants who, among other things, were shooting up. I cleaned out so many needles and glass pipes and drug paraphernalia, all while I had 5 college girls living in the front house. The same vagrants set a building right across the alley on fire and almost lit the neighborhood on fire. So when it comes to the neighbors, I do know the neighbor to the west. I do know the neighbor. I know the neighbors all around me. They're all delighted that they're going to do something with this building. Now, also, just as a point of clarification, we found pictures of this building on a 1900 fire map. So it was there in 1900. The garage has an existing concrete slab and foundation, and I'm putting garage in air quotes because historically speaking, a garage, an 8 by 16 foot parking spot was legitimate for a garage. So a 16 by 16 foot would have been a 2-car garage. Then that got changed to 9 by 19, and now it's a 0-car garage. So it can't even be turned back into a garage. It's not conforming for a garage in any capacity. The other issue that you're talking about size, we got one of the very first ADUs at our little garage here in Pine Street. At the time, there was a limit of 400 square feet. So our ADU is 380 square feet and people love it. I rent it long term. I don't want to run an Airbnb. We get visiting scholars in town, visiting professors. Our first several tenants were all from Europe. So people love it. So the size isn't a problem. And my architect has come up with a really great design. So anyway, I think it was pointed out by Robbie that there had been a demo permit. The previous owner died before they could get it demolished, but clearly the city didn't want it demolished. The city required Excel approval. The city required CenturyLink approval, Comcast approval, Department of Public Health and Environmental approval, Fire Department approval, Planning and Sustainability, Historic approval, deconstruction approval, erosion control approval, floodplain approval. So in addition to a lot of money, there was a lot of hoops to jump through to get it demolished. But when I saw it, I said, man, I want to turn that into something. And the reason now is because of my background. I'm an environmental consultant, and I hear from my city now of 62 years almost that there are some goals like affordability, sustainability, energy efficiency, carbon reduction, walkability, density, fewer cars, historic preservation, public safety, addition of ADUs, and recently, after I bought the property, Sundance Film Festival lodging. So rather than dig up the foundation that was there, rather than re-pour concrete, which has a huge carbon footprint, and rather than bulldoze the house, do what my neighbors at 2021 did right next door, which I love them, they're great, but they have a Minecraft house behind them. And the previous people showed why you have so many Minecraft homes in Boulder. When you make that box and you tell an architect to maximize my square footage, that's what you get. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do what 2037 did, which is put in an apartment complex. And I know I'm zoned to do that. I could also turn this home back into a single family residence, get my ADU, take an affordable house off the market, flip it for a lot of money, and not worry about it. But I don't want to do that either. I could also just fence it off and abandon it like the owners of the September School have done across the street and give it back to the vagrants. But I don't want to do that either, because I don't think any of that really aligns with the goals of the city. So with that, all these things that you just heard are true. I could probably put an ADU somewhere else on the property at a greater expense, greater carbon footprint, won't reuse any materials. I put solar on this house. I put heat pumps in this house. I would have loved to have tapped into that solar. But this is an 126-year-old house with a lot of character. And this garage was, until the roof fell in, really cool. So I'm your Huckleberry. I want to keep this thing. My question is the city going to embrace their goals or obstruct themselves? And my job as a consultant is generally pointing out how you're getting in your own way. So I certainly approve I applaud your time, and I thank you in advance either way that this goes. But that's my position. So if you're scratching your heads going, well, why the hell does he want to save this dilapidated garage? It's for all the environmental reasons. It's the coolness factor. It's the preserving the house without a big bump off on the back. It's a brick house. It's a cool single brick house. There's semantics involved with this. I'm not an attorney, but the semantics of single family residence, I have one. It just happens to now be a duplex, which I didn't do, the previous owner did. And I bought that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And my architect, Kristen's on also, and I might give her a chance to talk. But like I said, I know it got late on you guys, and I don't want to keep you on. But again, yeah, if you're scratching your head wondering why the hell did Greg and Heidi want to try to save this building? That's why. It's in a cool spot. I'm not asking, I'm not like going to the city saying, hey, can I have a variance to squeeze a building into this tiny little flag thing? There's something there with a foundation and a footprint. And the footprint won't change. That's going to be identical. The bulk plane, I guess, will change because the roof pitch will get higher. But the building footprint, I'm going to use the existing brick and concrete foundation. So it's identical. So I'm a fast talker. I hope that helps. And yeah, fire away any questions. And if you want to hear from Kristen, she can talk more about sort of the site and other things. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, Kristen, why don't you add whatever you're going to add to the presentation before we go for questions to you two?
Kristen,
Okay, now you can hear me, right?
Now we can,
we
now
hear
we can
you.
hear you.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for hanging on this evening for this review. Greg has spoken to the heart of the matter and his love for Boulder and all of those things. I want to speak to you about the nuts and bolts of this variance and why we're trying to do this. And, first of all, we're going to talk about the site, which it's already been confirmed by Robbie that it's a really odd site. Okay. And so there is that constraint. If we had a full back, typical of a rectangular site, that's another almost 30 feet that got taken out of a 50-foot lot. If we had that extra 30 feet, we'd be here and we'd still be asking for a principal building. We can't ask for an ADU, but we would only be asking for a rear yard setback variance. We would not be asking for side yard setback. So if we had a full site there, we would need 1 out of the 4 that have been outlined. So, and the reason, again, to reiterate that what Robbie said and what Greg has said is that this is an existing building. It is an existing footprint. It is an existing foundation that was somewhat reinforced to code based on our engineer's review. I don't know when. We don't know when. Before 3 years ago when Greg bought it. So there is a foundation there for that footprint. And that's the only reason we want, that's the main reason why we're asking for these variances. We understand now. I'm sorry, I was very, very confused about the rear yard setback. Robbie set me straight on that. I really appreciate that. So I don't know if I can share my screen. Is that something? Can I just hit share?
I believe so. Thomas should be able to give that to you. We still have 4 minutes.
Yeah, you should have that permission.
Okay, let me just see if I can. Why is that? I'm not so good at this, even though I do this all the time.
There should be a green share icon at the bottom of the screen with an arrow.
Yeah, but nothing else is coming up. Hang on, let me bring up this other screen or this other window. What the heck?
And if Kristen, if it would help, if I shared my screen with something already presented, I can do that while you talk.
Yeah, I was going to just show, let me just see, crap. Yeah, why don't you just show the, go back to your site plan where you outlined the green, the area in which we could build. So again, this is RH2. So even though it's relatively low, I think it goes up to RH4. This is a funky zoning because it's right downtown. I mean, it's at one street off of Pearl. It's an area where we want density, but that's beside the point. So let's get back to this idea of we could possibly build in that green area. And you see just the back of the house on the screen, right? And there's an existing covered entrance called out there. So this is our box where we could build without a variance. Now, part of our issue is that there is this front house, you saw the picture of it, is a single family brick house that's over 125 years old. And that house has been configured into a duplex well before my clients bought it. And if you were to add directly onto the back of the house, you omit basically windows in the upper bedrooms that are for egress and light because the roof comes down on the sides. So the reality is you can't really add on to the back of this building. So then what do you need? You need 6 feet, right? A separation of 6 feet between buildings per code. And so if you move that back 6 feet and with the 10-foot setback from that jog in the north property line, that's about 30 feet, you end up with about 500 square feet of buildable area. So sure, we could put a building there. It wouldn't be lovely. You would have no backyard. You would be using up, and we could still do it because right now we're at like 70% open space on that site. But we would like to keep the 70% open space. We would like to keep this, the house that was a single family house that is now a duplex. We'd like to keep it in its entirety and not modify it because it's not easy to modify. It would be costly to modify it. You've got 2 apartments, top and bottom. And if you slap something on the back, you're dealing with windows and everything else that doesn't work and circulation. So anyway, you could possibly build in that area that's 500 square feet. And what are you going to get? A building that's maybe 12, 14 feet wide. So it's funky and it would be a lot more costly. And so what we're proposing instead is saying, like, we have this existing foundation. This has been an existing building for probably maybe up to 100 years, right? It has been there. And it has been a blight on the neighborhood. It has been a danger to the neighborhood. And so what we are proposing is to turn that into a principal unit, which we can do given RH2. And in fact, we would not be changing open space. We would not be changing, you don't have site coverage, but that's the equivalent. We would not be changing FAR. We are basically taking the footprint with the existing foundation and building on top of that. And so of course, it made a lot of sense for it to be an ADU, but given the semantics of like it has to be a single family home, not a single family structure, we can't do that. So we understand that. So this is our plan B. And if you think about that chunk of the back, the northwest corner of the site, if we had that, we wouldn't be asking for 2, 3, and 4. We would just be asking for a rear yard setback. If it was a single family home, we could meet all the criteria with a maintenance easement, which Robbie has explained on the west side. And we realize very well that we will have to do that. And we realize that that is something, if we want to move forward, if we get a variance and we want to move forward with this, we completely understand that we need that maintenance easement from the west neighbor. The other thing I wanted to say is that when we submitted for this erroneously for the ADU, we decided
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you because you are out of time unless the chair grants you additional time to speak.
I have just like really one more main point to make and then just a quick summary.
Go ahead.
So what I was going to say is when we submitted for the building permit, we decided the only reasonable thing to do with this building is to make it a 1-hour rated building because we are close to the neighbors. And if you think about it, why do we have setbacks? We have setbacks for safety and we have setbacks for basically light and air and consideration to your neighbors. Well, anything we put here is going to be a nicer thing to all the neighbors in the alley and touching this space. And so it's that we are not, there's no impact to the neighbors other than doing something nicer, right? And then we are also, because we're doing this 1 hour, we're addressing the safety issue. We would not be required to do 1 hour everywhere, but we just said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to make the construction consistent. We're going to do 1 hour. So that has to do with just creating the safety that is the requirement, one thing we're trying to meet with setbacks. And so anyway, in conclusion, I mean, Greg has addressed all the other issues. Like, we're keeping an older home, 125-year-old home. We'd like to keep that, whole, and we'd like to not break that apart. And if we were to fill in the backyard, which we could, then you're actually impacting the neighbors. Then you're actually making it not as nice. Then there is no backyard. So we're trying to preserve a backyard between the two principal buildings. Anyway, so we're preserving open space, and again, it's a modest infill. It's existing essentially. So I don't even know if you'd call it an infill, but it's a repurposing of a building that's been there for a long time. And it is meeting these goals that the city states. It would be providing a third small, more affordable unit in downtown Boulder. So anyway, I really appreciate your consideration. It's a super funky site and it's a super funky request, but we think that it makes so much sense. And in terms of sustainability and efficiency and cost, it is the easiest way forward for these owners. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, board members, do you have questions for Kristen or Greg? Who wants to go first? Sean?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Drew?
Guess maybe a quick question on the foundation. You said you would reuse that foundation. Have you thoroughly evaluated the condition of that foundation?
Yeah, we had, and Kristen can speak to this too. We had an engineer look at it. Believe it or not, the house itself has a better foundation than my house at 23rd and Pine. The garage, again, not a garage anymore, has the exact same foundation. It's brick and concrete as my home here at 23rd and Pine. And the engineer looked at it, and it's sufficient to, he's put his stamp on it that it will hold a one-story building. And it's been there for a long time. And there was water. I found water and knob and tube electric to the building. So somebody, and evidence of a fire in there. So somebody was living in it historically as well.
Oh, thank you.
Greg, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Jill?
No, thank you. I don't have any questions of the applicant.
Okay. I just had one question with regard to the easement that you're gonna have to get and would be a requirement for approval. Have you done any preliminary exploration with that property owner?
Yeah, I have. In fact, I know them. I know all my neighbors because I'm that kind of a guy, right? I don't like to just, I've been here for 62 years. I know everybody in Boulder. But yes, I know the neighbors. They actually hang their tools on the side of that building. I mean, it is literally like they have a carport attached to it. And so it's like a common wall. So yes, I've talked to them. I've said, hey, if I'm going to fire rate this, we're going to change it up a little bit. I would be shocked if they said no, because they understand that building is just such an eyesore. And their house, I don't know how any of my neighbors did what they did, just that none of these setbacks apparently apply, or maybe they got variances, but their house looms over it, and they're just looking down on this horrible thing all the time. So they're excited that maybe something will happen to it other than have transients living in it smoking crack.
But you haven't formally asked them about the 2.75.
No, but I've told them that if I did something, I would need to get their approval. Yeah, but I have not formally asked for a maintenance easement per se.
Okay.
That came up with Robbie, so.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's first off, Thomas, are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thanks, Katie. There's actually nobody in the attendees list that is not in the meeting with us here currently on camera.
Okay, okay. Well, let's open it up to board discussion. And I guess we could just start with Craig, most recent member of the board. Do you have some initial thoughts or you want to share?
Sure. Yeah. So I think kind of looking at what Robbie said, I think kind of agree with the staff on most of the points. I think their primary concerns were on 1C and 1D. And I think from my perspective, I think from using the 1AC, I think the owner kind of spoke to why making an ADU in the backyard and not being able to do an ADU because of a primary, because of how the house is set up. I think that addresses the 1AC. And I think that similarly kind of also addresses 1AD. So I think that from my perspective right now, I think it meets all of the criteria.
Okay, Sean, you wanna go ahead and offer some thoughts?
Yeah, I also agree with Craig. Especially it meets H1A, especially H1AI. The lot is very unusual. Looking at the lot lines of the neighbors, that does not seem to be occurring throughout the neighborhood. So that satisfies H1B. And then I agree with what Craig said regarding H1, C and D. With D, I think some hardship could be created on the neighbor to the west, but as we discussed, this would we would recommend that easement be added. In which case, I would agree that the easement should be added, in which I think kind of overrides my concern with H1D. So with that easement, I think it satisfies that requirement.
Okay, Drew?
So what I'm struggling with is, we're, Board of Zoning Adjustment, right? And we're not like a planning department. Essentially, the city has imposed rules that says you can't have an ADU when you have a duplex. And essentially, that's what we're proving here. It's, even if the lot was full width, right? If it was a completely normal lot, you're not allowed to have an ADU right there. And so that's what I'm struggling with. And so I also, with Robbie, with your H1C, because of physical circumstances or conditions, the property cannot be reasonably be developed in conformity with the provisions of this chapter. I'm not sure if there are physical conditions that are preventing that's just you can't have an ADU when you have a duplex. That's my interpretation. And that's what I'm struggling with. So open for discussion.
Okay, Jill?
Once again, Drew, you and I are aligned, having a very hard time with this one. That doesn't feel right to me. If the building needs to come down, maybe it just needs to come down and you just get rid of the vagrancy issue because you don't have a shelter there. And if you can't develop it within reasonable conformity with the code, I'm not persuaded that we need a 326 square foot building there with this number of variances that I sit with the city on and saying, I don't know. So you articulated it well, and I concur.
Okay. I'm kind of where Drew and Jill are as well, but I wanted to just ask Robbie, after all of this discussion and after the applicant presentation, has your posture on H1C and D changed at all? And if you could just speak just a little bit to, again, the staff's questions about C and D.
Nothing has really changed. The questions are still there. I think the key part for staff when it comes to 1C is the word reasonable, because of such physical circumstances, and then or conditions. So it's not just the physical circumstances of the property, that the property cannot reasonably be developed in conformity with the chapter. We are well aware, it was intended to be an ADU. They want to utilize an existing building that can't be lived in and turn it into more housing for Boulder. But I think the big question I still have is it reasonably possible to construct the same thing in that quote unquote buildable area that I outlined? That's kind of still a big question. I still feel that, or staff still feels that the other criteria are still being met. It was brought up by somebody about, how did all these other houses get kind of similar conditions of, property, being close to property lines. The impact of the neighbor to the west, the subject neighbor to the northwest, they received a variance back in 2013 for an addition to the back of their house. For side yard combined and rear yard, so almost an identical variance. That's not necessarily relevant, but it was brought up in terms of the history of surrounding properties. So I did want to bring that to light to the board, that the subject property to the northwest that is arguably most impacted by this did receive a variance a little over 10 years ago. But other than that, we're still questioning whether or not, and this was a question presented during the last case that the board considered, is can reasonable development, and reasonable is subjective, it's up to the board and the applicants to determine what reasonable development would be, but is it possible to reconstruct in a by right, meaning not requiring a variance location, or in a location that requires less of a variance? That's still something that staff is questioning. So I would say that our stance on 1C and 1D is still there. And that's more just probably something that you can present to the applicant, whether or not that has been done like you did with the last item. So long story short, to answer your question, we're still questioning whether or not 1C and 1D are being met because of what was just said. And we still feel that the other criterion are being met.
Okay.
And I see a lot of hands up now.
Okay. Who wants to make a comment first?
Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks. Yeah. I just wanted to, I know it was brought up how, the ADU being on a property with a duplex, is not allowed, but that's kind of what's happening here. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's under our board's purview to judge on that. We're just looking at the setbacks. We would basically be treating this as if it was just rebuilding the garage or say a shed with the exact same dimensions. As far as, the primary or ADU being on the duplex property, I feel like that might run into issues with another department, but I'm not sure if that's something that we would be judging on tonight, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, you're spot on with that. So because they can't have an ADU, this property does allow for a third dwelling unit, which is why the principal setbacks come into play. maybe a way to think about it for anybody kind of discussing this is if this were to come in as just a replacement of a garage in the exact same location and dimensions, the setback issues would still be there, but they would be different setback issues because it would be then an accessory building versus a principal. So the board does not have purview in terms of what we call it. It is a principal building because it cannot be an accessory building. What the board is considering tonight are the specific setbacks that have been presented, not that it's principal versus accessory. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And yeah, I think that's what I have to say on that one.
My turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm struggling. So to me, this is an accessory building. It is currently an accessory building, correct?
Correct.
Right? The garage is an accessory building. And what they're asking to do on a flag lot configuration, which they knew when they bought the property, right, is to convert that flag lot into a residential lot. And yes, it's permitted. So I'm back where I started. It is permissible to have 3 units, but it's in a by right or in a less, not so many variance requests is what I'm trying to say. And I do appreciate what they're saying. I'm just struggling with it. I remain struggling with it. I am unconvinced that this situation and what we're being asked to do is the only solution here. And I recognize that there are windows upstairs and so on, and that the property is being used for vagrants, but that's not what's in front of us. The issue is this the minimal variance that we can accord? I'm unconvinced of that. So I guess I'm still sitting in the no camp right now. And Katie, as you know, we run into this continuance issue, whether we want to look at this some more, versus, I'm not sure where everybody is. I don't think I have a full straw count myself, but I'm clear where I am.
Okay. Just one last point of clarification. Robbie, would you mind just putting up the language of H1D? So I can just see the exact language.
Of course. And there you go.
Okay, and the staff's take on that any unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. In essence, the staff believes that because potentially it could be it could be built not on the footprint of the existing garage, and thereby minimizing the number of setback variances. That's why staff believes that D isn't necessarily being met. Correct?
Kind of extend off of that. I think the unnecessary hardship, and when staff looks at variances, it comes down to the term undue hardship, meaning a hardship that has been presented onto a property or onto property owners that prevents reasonable development. So the unnecessary hardship is more of is establishing a third dwelling unit a hardship, or not being able to establish a third dwelling unit hardship, that it results in principal structure setbacks. So I think it's more that we understand that there are site conditions or restrictions to put a clear put onto this property that in itself could result in that being a hardship, and that's where 1A kind of comes in. But at the same time, we are not necessarily sure that this isn't self-induced, because it is the establishment of a third dwelling unit, or essentially a second principal building. So that is kind of where we question whether or not this is an undue hardship or not.
Okay. That one personally is helpful for me, because I find that that I agree that I'm not convinced that the application meets that particular criteria. So I'm leaning towards no because of that criteria in particular. So, are there any other comments among the board members?
Do you, let me just say, do you want Deshawn to explain? I mean, I don't know whether contingency is an advantage to them or not, but
Yeah,
if-
I think it's, Deshawn, it would be helpful just once again to just go over how a continuance would work.
Absolutely. This is probably readily apparent, but as I am getting to my place in the rules, I want to acknowledge that the applicant has his hand up. And I know that we had a brief discourse about whether the board will hear comment from an applicant. So I just want to acknowledge that on the record and put it to the board to ask if there's any questions for the applicant. But I can speak to the continuance first. So if the board takes a formal vote this evening and it ends in a denial, then the applicant cannot bring a substantially similar application before BOZA for a 1-year period. So that's the big picture matter. The applicant can request a continuance or the board can request a continuance. I don't know if the applicant has an appetite for that. That seems worthwhile to inquire about. If the board would like to pursue a continuance, then there would be a vote on that. We would need a majority to be in support of a continuance. And then the next hearing date would be our next regularly scheduled BOZA meeting. And so I can get into greater details if the board would like to actually take a continuance vote, but I think that that is the information that was needed to be relayed. And I see Jill's raising her hand.
just because we just clarify, it can be at the next board meeting. It also can be within, isn't there we can permit it to be within a certain period of time.
So typically what the board has done in the past is, because sometimes the next meeting is a very short turnaround because there is process that has to happen for something to go to a hearing and notification. So typically what the board has done in the past is saying up to 90 days or in the next 3 months, they can return. And that way they then have that flexibility to gather more information or whatnot. Because to make the August meeting, we would need material or additional information, I believe, by the end of this week. And that's a very quick turnaround. So in the past, I think the board has allowed up to 3 months. I've heard up to 6 months. But correct me if I'm wrong, Deshauna, I believe the board has flexibility when it comes to how much time they have to come back.
You are correct. It's in the Senate structure, it defaults to the next regularly scheduled meeting or as otherwise granted by the board.
Okay, so we could, we could say up to 90 days.
Or 6 months, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, Katie, I want to ask you a question, may I?
Go ahead.
Is it clear? I don't know if we just do a show of hands or an aye or nay. Do we have a denial pending? Like, are there 3 of us that are going to turn this down right now? Because if we do, then I always want to offer people a continuance, but I'm just not clear if there's 3 of us. I know you and I.
Yep.
So that's 2. Can you go around and confirm?
Yeah, Drew, I thought it sounded a little bit like you were leaning towards no, but
Yeah, I mean that's correct. I mean, but I'll always offer a continuance over a no, just because it gives the opportunity to come back.
yeah.
And I guess I'm thinking about it further, and I also maybe I would like to understand better this zoning, RH2, right? It's it's high density. I mean, why exactly the code is written to basically not allow a living unit in the rear 25 feet. Maybe that's also a question for Robbie. But That's essentially what we're mostly discussing. Is like that's what the code says, is that we can't have a living unit in the rear 25 feet. Anyway, to further my thoughts on it.
Okay. Sean, do you have sort of an indication which way you're leaning?
I've been convinced by some of the arguments here. I was leaning yes, but I'm a little on the fence now, mostly just I'm hung up on H5 C. I'm not sure that this current configuration is the minimum variance that could happen. Um, but I would definitely be open to a continuance.
Okay. And Craig, do you have?
Yeah, I think you guys have kind of swayed me a little bit. I think I still lean towards yes. I could be swayed toward, currently leaning towards yes. I could be swayed towards no, and I'd certainly offer a continuance.
Well, it sounds like the majority is leaning towards a continuance. So does someone want to make a motion toward that end?
Unless the applicant, did I hear you correctly, Deshauna? The applicant may request the continuance rather than the board granting it, which means we don't have to do quite as much of a motion, but Deshauna, will you explain that again, please?
Yes, so the board can, on its own power, move to continue a hearing. The applicant can also request for the hearing to be continued. It doesn't change the timeline. Either way, the board still has the ability to set whatever range of time is appropriate in the circumstances, 90 days, 120 days. The board would still have to vote. If the applicant requests it or a board member requests it, it's still a vote.
In which case, why don't we just go ahead? I'm happy to provide a motion that I make a motion hereby that we continue. Is that right?
Robbie has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Robbie, you go.
Thank you. I was just going to say, if a continuance ultimately happens, for the courtesy of the applicant, just be clear if there are any questions or concerns from the board that they can look into and come back with. Continuation just because a denial is not wanted doesn't necessarily help the applicant. So if the board members could just be clear what specifically the concerns are, what specific criterion you have concerns over, and if there are any specific details that you would like to see come back, I think that would just be a benefit to the applicant themselves, so they know what to come back to should they decide to come back.
And
well, that's harder.
If I may follow up on Robbie's statement, the applicant also is entitled to have the ability to speak on the continuance before the vote is formally taken.
Okay, so now is the appropriate time to ask Kristen or Greg to offer comments?
Technically, the board member who, if someone's in favor, should make a motion, and then before the vote, the applicant would speak. So step one is make a motion to continue, and then applicant speaks, and then we vote.
Okay. So Jill, you want to make your motion again?
I'll try. I may need some help. So I move that we continue BOZ 2026 dash 00006 for a period of up to 6 months, 120 days, for the applicant to come back and explain, demonstrate to the board that this is in fact the only place, the minimal where another unit of 326 square feet can be built on the property, to demonstrate to us that the I guess the wording is very difficult on the issue of undue hardship, Deshauna, so I may need your help. But to clarify how it is that the request for a third unit isn't causing the undue hardship, because that is, I think, what we're struggling with. So I think those things are interrelated, but I think a demonstration of we tried to put 326 square feet on the one side of the building or the back of the building, and these are the issues that are there, but a genuine effort to design it so that we as a board can say, oh yeah, for sure, this is right. So it seems, I don't know if that's helpful because I feel like it's too wordy. So can I get some help with that?
Absolutely. As a threshold matter, are you proposing 120 days or 6 months? We just need to have a certain period of time clearly established.
Yeah, I think I meant 180 days. Sorry.
Okay. Possible language for your consideration would be you move to continue the hearing for up to 180 days to provide the applicant with the opportunity to more robustly address the criteria contained in 9-23 H1AC and H1A, excuse me, H1C and H1D, broadly speaking.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
good.
We need a second.
I second the motion.
And now is this the time that the applicant speaks to it, Deshauna, before we take a final vote?
Yes,
do
if that is correct.
Greg or Kristen, do you want to offer any comments before we finish our voting?
I would just say, I just want to thank everybody for consideration here. I know your job's not easy. I used to sell nuts and bolts at McGuckins, and people would come in with the craziest problem and say, what do you got for a nut or a bolt to solve this problem? And you guys get every nut and bolt in Boulder. So thank you for listening to this. I would just lean on affordability, sustainability, carbon footprint, all the goals that the city wants are really the reason I want to do this. It's not, it's really that. So we'll try to articulate that a little better. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all again. So thank you.
Can I speak also?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I just say thank you also. These are tough. We wouldn't be here if they weren't tough questions, you know. So, and I think what I heard, especially Jill say, is that you want to be convinced that we can't build something better within our kind of right of way for building. And so we'll come up with something and we'll show you, in our opinion, what we think is not a good solution and how we think that actually keeping the footprint of the garage and turning that into a principal unit, how that really saves the site and really saves the character of the historic home and really improves the alleyway. And so we will do our best to get that together for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg and Kristen. Okay, so Jill made the motion and I seconded it. So let's go around. Craig, do you want to offer your vote? For this
I'll vote
would be
in favor.
on the continuance. Okay. Sean?
Vote in favor of the continuance.
Okay, and Drew?
Favor.
Okay. And I'm an aye, and Jill?
Aye.
Okay. So that the motion for a continuance of a period of up to 180 days is approved, with the applicant agreeing to come back and specifically flesh out criteria H1, C, and D. So that motion is approved.
Right. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, I guess we've got both approval of the last minutes and then any other staff matters. I didn't see minutes from the last meeting attached. Thomas, have you circulated those yet?
Yes, those were updated a few days after the packet was distributed.
Okay, okay. That was me then.
No, I had the exact same question. Where are they?
They're at the after the second item. I can also pull those up as well if we want to review them, or we can also delay that.
Can we just delay it? I don't know about you guys, but time is getting on here.
Okay,
So,
all right. Well, we can, as long as it's fine, Deshauna, for us to postpone the approval until next meeting, let's do that.
That is perfectly acceptable.
Okay. Robbie, did you have any other staff items?
Just a couple quick things, but first, Shauna, did you have anything from City Attorney's Office?
I do not.
Okay, I just wanted to check. So one is you'll notice real quick that we split this application up because of an issue that was happening at the last meeting. That's because we're having issues with our form stack, which is the new way we do applications. It auto generates for the applicants and then they provide that. And something with how we upload and form stack is causing really bad issues, meaning it replaces information on forms. So the solution to that is to separate the two items so it doesn't happen. We are on that. We're going to get it fixed. And then eventually the board's just going to pivot to the new one meeting format, which is what all the other boards and commissions are actively going to. So I just wanted to clarify why you saw two links to the meeting versus one, and it's because we're having form stack issues. So that should be fixed soon. So just be patient with us. We apologize. And then really quickly, the application deadline for the August 11th meeting was, what's today? Oh, it was yesterday, Monday. And we do, it looks like, have two items that were submitted. I have yet to do my full formal completeness check, so I'm not sure if either or both are moving forward, but it does appear we're going to have an August 11th meeting and possibly a third item, which is the continuation of the item tonight, should they choose to move forward to the August meeting. So 2, possibly 3 items are moving forward to the August meeting. And that's it from me.
Okay. Well, if that's it, then we can adjourn the meeting. Unless, Robbie, I just want to ask, was there any update about the staff retreat, or if not,
we're still kicking that can down the road. A lot of boards and commissions have yet to do it, but we're leaning towards attaching it to the end of an already scheduled meeting. But of course, we would want an agenda that is not complex, like it sounds like next month's could also be. So stay tuned on that. But as soon as we have 1 or 2 meetings that we think would be good for the board, we will let you know. So maybe the board can discuss whether or not it works for everybody, because we would really like for everybody to attend when we ultimately have it. So stay tuned on that, but I can guarantee it's not going to be in August.
Okay. All right. Well,
and just one point on that, I will miss the September meeting.
September. Thank you for letting me know.
and August 11th is my birthday, so I hope it's a short meeting.
we'll be fast.
We'll see.
Thank you, Katie. Great job.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.